August 22, 1988, 6:23 p.m. A father in Saitama Prefecture grips the phone, his hands shaking. His 4-year-old daughter, Mari Kono, walked out of their apartment complex 3 hours earlier to play with a friend. She never came home. As he reports her missing somewhere around 50 kilometers away, in a patch of forest near the Shintama power substation, Mari's small body lies cooling on the ground. A 26-year-old man with twisted, deformed hands has just strangled her to death and walked away, leaving no witnesses and almost no trace. 3 weeks later, the family phone will start ringing in the middle of the night. When Mari's father answers, there will be only silence, no voice, no demands, just breathing. The calls will continue for weeks, always at night, always silent, as if someone is savoring the family's fear through the telephone line. Before 10 months have passed, 3 more little girls, aged between 4 and 7, will vanish from the streets of Tokyo and Saitama. All will be strangled. All will be desecrated. One will be dismembered in the killer's home. When police finally raid that home, they will find 5,163 video cassettes stacked from floor to ceiling, including recordings of the killer posing and mutilating his victims' bodies. He will confess to sleeping beside their decomposing corpses, drinking their blood, and roasting parts of their hands and eating the flesh. He will mail burned bone fragments and teeth to one victim's family in a cardboard box, and follow with a typed confession describing in cold detail how a child's body changes as it rots. The man's name is Tsutomu Miyazaki. The Japanese media will christen him the otaku killer, the human Dracula, and Rat Man. His crimes will ignite a moral panic that stains an entire youth culture, and 4 dead children will become the price Japan pays for recognizing too late what kind of monster had been living in its suburbs. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born on August 21, 1962, in Itsukaichi, a small town west of Tokyo. He came into the world prematurely, weighing only 2.2 kilograms. His body was frail and malformed. He had a rare congenital defect called radioulnar synostosis. The bones in his forearms were fused, locking his wrists and preventing normal rotation. To turn his palms upward, he had to twist his entire arm from the elbow. His hands hung stiffly, like those of an old man trapped in a young boy's body. On the surface, the Miyazaki family appeared successful and respectable. His father, Katsumi, owned a local newspaper, the Akikawa Shimbun. His grandfather and great-grandfather had both served in local politics. The family had money, status, and influence in the community. Inside the home, however, there was little warmth for Tsutomu. His father was consumed by work and the family's reputation. His mother tried to fill the emotional void with gifts instead of affection. Among those gifts, years later, was a black Nissan Langley, an ordinary compact car that would become the vehicle of choice in the abduction of at least 2 of his victims. The only person who consistently showed him real care was his grandfather, Shokichi. The old man spent time with him, listened to him, and treated him as more than a burden or an embarrassment. For much of his childhood, his grandfather was the only emotional anchor he had. School was a daily lesson in cruelty. Classmates mocked his strange hands, imitating his stiff movements, pointing and laughing. In family and school photographs, young Tsutomu learned to hide his arms, tucking them behind his back or inside his sleeves. His eyes were often half closed in pictures, as if he didn't quite belong in the scene at all. In the locker room, the bullying intensified. During physical education, other boys noticed his underdeveloped genitals. One would later describe his penis as no thicker than a pencil, no longer than a toothpick. Humiliation piled atop humiliation. He began to avoid changing in front of others and avoided girls entirely. He had 2 younger sisters and an older one, but rather than providing comfort, his siblings largely rejected him. Within his own family, he felt like a stranger, neglected by his parents, mocked by classmates, and shut out by his sisters. He retreated into a private world. That world was made of ink and images. While other children played outside, Tsutomu spent long nights immersed in manga and television, reading and rereading comics under dim light until exhaustion closed his eyes. In a school essay, he wrote that his dream for the future was simple: to buy a car, drive somewhere, stop at a restaurant, and eat curry with rice, maybe visiting relatives on the way. It was an ordinary dream from a boy who wanted nothing more than to feel ordinary. But as the years passed, the gap between his fantasies and his reality only grew wider. Despite his social isolation and physical deformity, Miyazaki performed well academically. He became the first student from his junior high school to be accepted into Meidai Nakano High School, a prestigious feeder school linked to Meiji University. On paper, it looked like the beginning of a success story. In practice, it magnified everything that was already broken. The commute alone was punishing. Roughly 2 hours each way on crowded trains and buses, 6 years of daily travel between his home and the school. He spent up to 4 hours a day in transit, surrounded by strangers, yet completely alone. At first his grades were strong, but they steadily declined. In his final year, he ranked 40th out of 56 students in his class. While others formed friendships and clubs, he often sat in corners drawing his own comics, silently drifting away from the social life around him. His dream was to continue on to Meiji University, study English, and become a teacher. To his family, that would have redeemed him: a respectable job, a normal life, a son they could be proud of. But his grades were not good enough. He failed to secure the school's recommendation. In his mind, it wasn't his effort that had failed him. It was his body, his cursed hands. The deformity that had made him a target from childhood became, in his own narrative, the reason all doors closed in his face. Instead of entering Meiji University, he enrolled in a junior college to study photography and printing technology. The camera quickly became central to his identity. Through the lens, he could observe others without being observed himself. He could watch life from a safe distance, always one step removed. It was the perfect tool for someone who felt incapable of genuine connection. Around 1983, after graduating, he became a printing assistant at a small company with ties to his father. He was quiet, competent, and unremarkable. Over 3 years, he saved more than 3 million yen, a considerable sum at the time, and moved back into a 2-room annex on the family property, which he shared with his older sister. By day, he worked. By night, his true life began. During his college years, he had started bringing cameras to tennis courts, crouching beneath the nets to film female players from below, focusing on their legs and crotches. The recordings gave him a sense of control, a secret power over women who would never acknowledge him otherwise. Ordinary pornography, widely available in video rental stores, quickly bored him. He complained that censorship laws in Japan required adult videos to blur or obscure pubic hair, hiding the important part. But those same censorship rules did not apply to images of children whose bodies had not yet developed secondary sexual characteristics. Child pornography in the mid-1980s slipped through gaps in Japanese law, and Miyazaki began hunting it obsessively. His video collection grew. Hundreds of tapes became thousands. They filled shelves, stacked in towers from floor to ceiling. Mainstream anime, horror films, violent exploitation movies, and an ever-increasing volume of child sexual abuse material. Among the titles was the Guinea Pig series, a set of ultra-violent Japanese pseudo-snuff films depicting graphic torture, dismemberment, and murder in disturbingly realistic detail. One film in the series, which depicted a woman being slowly dissected alive, would later serve as a blueprint for how Miyazaki treated one of his victims. He was no longer just watching. He was studying, memorizing, preparing. By the mid-1980s, Tsutomu Miyazaki's isolation had become absolute. He had no friends, no romantic prospects, no human connections beyond the cold formality of his workplace and the strained silence of his family home. His sexual obsession with children intensified. He began to fantasize about suicide, imagining escape from a life that had become unbearable. The only thread still tying him to the world was his grandfather, Shokichi, the man who had raised him, who had talked to him when no one else would, who had treated him like he mattered. In May 1988, that thread was severed. His grandfather died. The loss occurred just 3 months before Miyazaki would kill for the first time, and the timing was not coincidental. Years later, a clinical psychologist who interviewed him would reveal that Miyazaki believed his crimes could somehow bring his grandfather back to life, a twisted, magical thinking born from grief and psychosis. The death sent him spiraling into a depression so profound that it warped his already fragile grip on reality. What he did next reveals just how far he had already fallen. After the funeral, Miyazaki took some of his grandfather's ashes and ate them. He later explained to investigators that he wanted to keep something of him inside himself forever, a grotesque attempt to preserve the only love he had ever known by literally consuming it. With his grandfather gone, the last barrier between Miyazaki and violence collapsed. A few weeks later, his younger sister caught him spying on her while she showered. When she screamed at him to leave, he exploded with rage, bursting into the bathroom and attacking her, slamming her head against the bathtub. The incident exposed his perversion to the entire family. His mother confronted him, demanding that he work more and stop wasting his life on videos. He responded by attacking her as well, lashing out with the same uncontrolled fury. His family was horrified. His isolation was now complete. And inside him, something had snapped. Years later, during his trial, he would try to explain what was happening in his mind during those final months before he killed. I felt completely alone, and whenever I saw a little girl playing by herself, it was almost like seeing myself. On August 21, 1988, Tsutomu Miyazaki turned 26 years old. The next day, one day after his birthday, he committed his first murder. August 22, 1988, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The summer heat is thick and oppressive across Saitama Prefecture. 4-year-old Mari Kono steps out of her apartment building in the village of Iruma, wearing shorts, a shirt, and small sandals. She's going to play with a friend in the courtyard. Her parents expect her back within the hour. A black Nissan Langley pulls up near the building. The driver is thin, with strangely stiff arms and an awkward, mechanical way of moving. He steps out and approaches the little girl with a soft voice and a gentle smile. "Don't you want to go somewhere cool?" he asks. Mari is 4 years old. She trusts adults the way children do. She nods. She takes his hand. She gets into the car. Miyazaki drives west, away from the city, toward the mountains. About 90 minutes later, the Nissan turns onto a narrow dirt road in a forested area near the Shintama power substation. He parks and leads Mari up a mountain trail toward Komina Pass. The air is thick with the scream of cicadas and the cooing of doves. They walk for 20 or 30 minutes before he guides her off the trail into the woods, about 20 meters from the path where hikers might pass. He tells her to sit down. Mari is tired now, confused, maybe frightened. She begins to whimper, soft, uncertain sounds that might turn into crying, might turn into screaming. Miyazaki panics. The trail is popular. What if someone hears? What if she screams? But he never intended to take her home. He places his hands around her throat. His thumbs press against her small, fragile windpipe. Mari's face freezes in shock. She doesn't understand what's happening. She kicks. She struggles. Her tiny hands claw at his wrists. He squeezes harder. For 4 or 5 minutes, her body fights. Then, slowly, the kicking stops. The struggling ends. Her small body goes limp in his hands. When he's certain she's dead, Miyazaki carefully removes her clothes, shorts, underwear, shirt, shoes. He touches her body, arranges it gently, lays her out as if she's simply sleeping. Then he gathers her clothing, walks back down the trail, gets into his car, and drives away. No witnesses, no evidence, no trace. At 6:23 p.m., 3 hours later, architect Shigeo Kono picks up the telephone and dials the police. His daughter has not come home. She was playing just outside their apartment. She should have been back by now. The search begins immediately. Police mobilize massive resources. Over the coming weeks and months, they will conduct 2,130 man-days of interviews, distribute 50,000 missing person posters across the entire country, and deploy tracking dogs to the area where Mari was last seen. The dogs find nothing. The posters yield nothing. The interviews lead nowhere. Mari Kono has simply vanished. But the torment has only just begun. A few weeks later, the Kono family's telephone rings in the middle of the night. Shigeo Kono, exhausted and desperate, picks up the receiver. Silence, just breathing on the other end. No words, no demands, no explanation. The call ends. The next night, it happens again and again, always late at night, always silent, always terrifying. Someone is watching them. Someone is listening to their pain. Then, in early September, a postcard arrives at the Kono home. It contains only 4 words, cut from magazine letters. "Here demons dwell." Police dismiss it as the work of a sadist feeding off the family's suffering. They have no idea that the sender is the killer himself, that he's watching the investigation on television, reading about it in newspapers, feeding on the family's agony like a parasite. Mari Kono's body is still lying in the forest, decomposing slowly in the summer heat. And Tsutomu Miyazaki is already hunting his second victim. 6 weeks after Mari Kono's disappearance, on October 3, 1988, Tsutomu Miyazaki is driving through the city of Hano in Saitama Prefecture. It's a Monday afternoon. School has just let out. He spots a 7-year-old girl walking alone along the side of the road. Her name is Masami Yoshizawa. She's a first grader, small for her age, wearing her school uniform. Miyazaki pulls over, talks to her, and convinces her to get into his car. He drives to the same area where he killed Mari Kono. the hills above Komine Pass. The forest is quiet, isolated, safe from witnesses. He strangles Masami to death. This time, he works quickly, stripping her body before rigor mortis can set in, making it easier to remove her clothing. He performs sexual acts on the corpse. At one point, the dead girl's body jerks involuntarily, a muscle spasm, a post-mortem reflex. The sudden movement startles him. He panics and flees, leaving her body in the woods. Masami Yoshizawa's remains are left less than 100 meters from where Marikono's bones are slowly bleaching in the sun. Police launch another massive search, another 2,300 man-days of interviews, another wall of missing person posters plastered across the prefecture. But again, they find nothing. Masami is declared a missing person. Her family receives the same treatment as the Konos: silent phone calls in the middle of the night, an invisible presence on the other end of the line, breathing, listening, feeding on their terror. 2 months later, on December 12, 1988, Miyazaki strikes again. 4-year-old Erika Namba is walking home from a friend's house in the town of Naguri. It's early evening, around 5 o'clock. The sun is setting. The streets are quiet. Miyazaki approaches her, lures her into his car, and drives to the parking lot of a youth nature center in Naguri. It's isolated, surrounded by trees. No one is around. In the back seat of the Nissan, he orders Erika to undress. She's terrified, crying, but she obeys. He takes out his camera. The flash pops in the darkness of the car. Click, click, click. Suddenly, another car drives past. Its headlights briefly illuminate Miyazaki's face. Erika starts crying harder, sobbing uncontrollably. Miyazaki panics again. He grabs her by the throat, uses his body weight to crush her airway, pressing down with all his strength. She kicks, she struggles, but she's only 4 years old. By 7 o'clock, Erika Namba is dead. Miyazaki wraps her small body in a sheet, places it in the trunk of his car, and dumps her clothing in the woods behind the parking lot. Then he gets back in the driver's seat and heads for the road. But on a sharp turn, his front tire slips into a drainage ditch. The car gets stuck. Miyazaki turns on the hazard lights. He grabs the sheet-wrapped corpse from the trunk and disappears into the dark forest. He hides the body deep in the trees, then returns to the car carrying only the empty, crumpled sheet. 2 men have stopped to help. They see a thin, awkward young man standing next to a stuck car. Miyazaki calmly opens the trunk, tosses the sheet inside, and explains his situation. The 2 men help push the car free. Miyazaki gets in and drives away without saying thank you. The next day, searchers find some of Erika's clothing in the woods. A day later, they discover her body, hands, and feet bound with nylon cord. The 2 witnesses come forward. They remember the car. They remember the license plate was from Hachioji. But they make a critical mistake. They identify the vehicle as a Toyota Corolla 2. Police immediately begin checking every Corolla 2 registered in Hachioji. More than 6,000 vehicles. They interview owners. They inspect cars. They follow leads. But Miyazaki drives a Nissan Langley, not a Corolla. This single error allows him to slip through the net. On December 20th, Erika Namba's family receives a postcard made from letters cut out of magazines. Erika, cold, cough, throat, rest, death, and the phone calls begin again, late at night, silent, terrifying. 3 little girls are dead, and Tsutomu Miyazaki is just getting started. February 6th, 1989, 6 o'clock in the morning. Nearly 6 months have passed since Mari Kono disappeared. Her father, Shigeo, has barely slept. Every day is the same nightmare, hoping for news, dreading what that news might be. The silent phone calls continue. The police have no leads. On this cold winter morning, Shigeo Kono steps outside his home to leave for work. A cardboard box is sitting on his doorstep. He opens it. Inside are ashes, dirt, fragments of charred bone, and 10 tiny milk teeth. There are also photographs, pictures of a child's shorts, underwear, and sandals, and a sheet of paper with 5 words written in crude letters: Mari, bones, cremated, investigate, prove. Shigeo's hands shake. His vision blurs. He drops to his knees. Forensic analysis confirms what the family already knows in their hearts. The remains belong to Mari Kono. While police had been searching rivers and mountains, while volunteers had been distributing posters, while the Kono family had been clinging to hope, Tsutomu Miyazaki had returned to the forest. He had located Mari's decomposed body, cut off her hands and feet, taken them home, placed them in his oven, and burned them. Then he had crushed the remaining bones into powder and mailed them to her father. 5 days after the box arrives on February 11th, the Kono family receives a letter. It's 3 pages long, typed on a manual typewriter. The signature at the bottom reads, Yuko Imada, a Japanese pun that translates to, "Now I will talk." The letter is calm, matter-of-fact, clinical. I placed the cardboard box with Mari's remains in front of her house. I did everything, from the beginning of the incident with Mari to the end. The writer explains that he watched the police press conference on television, where investigators said the remains might not belong to Mari. He saw Mari's mother react to that news with renewed hope. I understood that I had to write this confession so that Mari's mother would not continue to hope in vain. I repeat, the remains are Mari. Then the letter descends into horror. The writer describes in meticulous detail what happens to a dead body over time, how the skin changes color, how the flesh breaks down, how the smell evolves. The body becomes covered with red spots, large red spots, like the flag of Hinomaru, like red seal stamps covering the entire body. He describes how rigor mortis set in. The child's body stiffened. I wanted to cross her arms over her chest, but they wouldn't bend. Then he describes the later stages of decomposition. Then the body becomes covered with stretch marks. Before, it was so stiff, but now it's as if it's full of water. And the smell. What a smell! Unlike anything else in this entire world. The letter is signed not by Tsutomu Miyazaki, but by Ratman. After Mari's funeral, a second letter arrives, titled simply Confession. It's even more detailed than the first, providing a chronological account of the changes in Mari's body from the moment of death through advanced decomposition. It reads like a scientific report, detached, observational, as if the writer is describing an experiment rather than the murder of a child. Police handwriting analysts study the letters. Linguistic experts analyze the phrasing, but they have no suspects, no database to compare it against. The letters offer no clues, only cruelty. And in a small 2-room annex in Itsukaichi, Tsutomu Miyazaki sits watching television coverage of the case, his deformed hands resting on his lap, a faint smile on his lips. He's not finished yet. June 6, 1989. Nearly 10 months have passed since Mari Kono's murder. 3 little girls are dead or missing. The police investigation has stalled. The public is terrified. Parents refuse to let their children play outside alone. Tsutomu Miyazaki drives to the Ariake tennis courts near Tokyo Bay. The courts are closed for the day, but he's not there to play tennis. In a small park adjacent to the courts, he spots a 5-year-old girl playing alone. Her name is Ayako Nomoto. Miyazaki approaches with his camera hanging around his neck. He's smiling, friendly, harmless. "Let me take your picture," he suggests. Ayako is curious. He snaps a few photos. She smiles for the camera. It's a game. "Let's take more pictures in the car," he says. She follows him, gets into the Nissan. They drive about 800 meters to a more secluded spot. Ayako climbs into the back seat. Miyazaki hands her a piece of gum. Then she notices his hands. She stares at them, the twisted, fused bones, the awkward, claw-like fingers. She makes a comment about how strange they look. Something inside Miyazaki snaps. Rage floods through him, years of humiliation, mockery, rejection, all condensed into a single, murderous moment. He pulls on vinyl gloves. "This is what happens to children who say things like that," he hisses. He grabs her throat with both hands. Ayako kicks, struggles, claws at his wrists. She kicked and kicked, but went limp after 4 or 5 minutes. He will later tell police. When she's dead, he tapes her mouth shut with duct tape. He binds her wrists with vinyl cord. He wraps her small body in a sheet and places it in the trunk of his car. But this time, Miyazaki doesn't drive to the mountains. This time, he drives home. On the way, he stops at a video rental store in Koenji and rents a video camera. He waits in a nearby parking lot for 2 hours until darkness falls. Then he carries Ayako Nomoto's corpse into his small annex. He unwraps the sheet, strips off her clothes, wipes her body with a towel. He places her on a low kotatsu table, the kind of heated table common in Japanese homes. He spreads her legs apart and tapes her genitals with duct tape. Then he turns on the camera. He photographs her, films her, moves her limbs into different positions. He masturbates while recording, but he doesn't stop there. Over the next 2 days, Miyazaki sleeps next to Ayako's decomposing body. He makes cuts in her skin and drinks her blood. He continues to photograph and film the corpse in various poses. On the 2nd day, the smell becomes unbearable. Decomposition has accelerated in the warm June air. The body is swelling, leaking fluids, filling the small room with a stench of rot. Miyazaki realizes he has to get rid of it. He takes a kitchen knife and a saw. He cuts off Ayako's head, then her arms, then her legs. The dismemberment is clumsy, brutal, but effective. He wraps the torso in plastic and, under cover of darkness, dumps it near a public restroom at Miyazawa-ko Cemetery. Then he takes Ayako's hands to his backyard. He builds a small fire, places the severed hands over the flames. The flesh sizzles, blackens, chars, and then Tsutomu Miyazaki eats parts of them. He later admits to police that he consumed the flesh and drank the blood of at least 2 of his victims. In Ayako's case, he keeps her roasted hands for days before finally discarding the remains. The skull and other body parts are thrown into the wooded hills of Mitakeyama, a 230-meter hill directly in front of his house. 5 days later, on June 11th, a cemetery worker discovers Ayako's torso. Police quickly identify the remains as Ayako Nomoto. A massive manhunt begins. Investigators realize they are no longer looking for a kidnapper. They are hunting a cannibal. July 23, 1989, a hot Sunday afternoon in Hachioji, western Tokyo. 2 young sisters are playing near a public water fountain. A small black car pulls up. A thin man with awkward, stiff movements gets out. He approaches the girls, smiles, talks softly. "You stay here," he tells the older sister. Then he leads the younger girl, a 6-year-old, toward a nearby riverbank. But the older sister doesn't stay. She runs home. She bursts through the door, breathless, terrified. "A strange man took her," she screams. Her father bolts out of the house and sprints toward the river. When he arrives, he sees his youngest daughter, naked, and a man crouched over her, positioning a camera between her legs. The father charges. He tackles Miyazaki, knocking him to the ground. The two men struggle. Miyazaki breaks free and runs toward the marshy edge of the river. Then, inexplicably, he stops running. Instead of fleeing into the woods, instead of abandoning his car and disappearing into the city, Miyazaki turns around and walks back toward his Nissan Langley. By the time he reaches it, police have already arrived. Officers arrest him on the spot for forcing a minor to engage in indecent acts. They take him to the Hachioji police station. His name is Tsutomu Miyazaki. He's 26 years old. He lives with his family in Itsukaichi. The interrogation begins. 2 days later, police execute a search warrant on Miyazaki's 2-room annex. What they find inside is beyond comprehension. 5,763 video cassettes. The tapes are stacked floor to ceiling, covering every available surface. Shelves sag under their weight. The room is a labyrinth of plastic spines. Most of the collection is ordinary: anime, mainstream movies, television recordings. But buried among them are hundreds of pornographic videos, including graphic child sexual abuse material, horror films, slasher movies, the Guinea Pig series. And then, investigators find the tapes that seal his fate. Videos of Miyazaki's victims, photographs of their corpses, footage of him dismembering their bodies, evidence of 4 murders filmed by the killer himself. August 9, 1989, 17 days after his arrest, Miyazaki confesses to the murder of Ayako Nomoto. The next day, guided by his directions, police recover her skull in the Okutama Hills. August 10th, he confesses to killing Erika Namba. August 11th, he confesses to murdering Mari Kono. By mid-September, he admits to the killing of Masami Yoshizawa. On September 6, 1989, searchers find Masami's remains in the forest near Komine Pass. A week later, they discover the partially gnawed bones of Mari Kono's hands and feet nearby. Shigeo Kono's desperate plea to have his daughter's limbs returned is finally horribly fulfilled. The case that terrorized Japan for nearly a year is solved. 4 little girls, 4 families destroyed, 1 monster in custody. But the nightmare is far from over. March 30th, 1990, Tokyo District Court. The trial of Tsutomu Miyazaki begins. The courtroom is packed with journalists, legal observers, and family members of the victims. Security is tight. The atmosphere is electric with rage and grief. When Miyazaki is led into the courtroom, spectators gasp. He's small, thin, almost childlike in appearance. His twisted hands hang awkwardly at his sides. He keeps his eyes down, his voice barely above a whisper. The judge has to repeatedly ask him to speak louder. But the question at the center of this trial is not whether Tsutomu Miyazaki committed the murders. He has already confessed to all 4. The physical evidence is overwhelming. The videos, the photographs, the remains. The question is, was he sane when he did it? Under Japanese law, defendants who are genuinely insane cannot be held criminally responsible. Those with significant cognitive impairment may receive reduced sentences. For Miyazaki's defense team, proving mental illness is the only path to avoiding execution. But there's a problem. Miyazaki's father, Katsumi, the newspaper owner, the family patriarch, refuses to hire private attorneys for his son. When asked why, he gives a brief, bitter answer: "It would be unfair to the victims." The refusal leaves Tsutomu with only court-appointed public defenders. It takes weeks to find lawyers willing to take the case. One finally agrees, not because he believes in Miyazaki's innocence, but because he is categorically opposed to the death penalty. The trial will last 7 years. During the proceedings, Miyazaki's behavior is bizarre, disconnected, often incoherent. He speaks in fragments. He avoids eye contact. When describing the murders, he shows no emotion, no remorse, no shame, no acknowledgement of the suffering he caused. And then he introduces the court to someone new. Ratman. According to Miyazaki, Ratman is an alternate personality, a separate entity living inside him. He describes Ratman as a grotesque rat-like creature that takes control of his body and forces him to commit acts he would never do on his own. During court sessions, Miyazaki draws pictures of Ratman. The drawings are crude, cartoonish, a humanoid figure with rat features, sharp teeth, clawed hands. He insists that Ratman is real, that Ratman killed the girls, not him. "I didn't do it. Ratman did it," he repeats over and over. The prosecution argues that Ratman is a fabrication, a convenient fiction designed to avoid responsibility. The defense argues that it's evidence of dissociative identity disorder, formerly known as multiple personality disorder. The court orders psychiatric evaluations. The initial team of 6 psychiatric experts from Keio University examines Miyazaki extensively. They conduct interviews, administer psychological tests, review his personal history. Their conclusion: Miyazaki is fully capable of understanding his actions and controlling his behavior. He has personality disorders, certainly. He is deeply disturbed, but he is not insane. He knew what he was doing. He knew it was wrong. He chose to do it anyway. The defense refuses to accept this conclusion. They request a second evaluation, an extremely rare move in Japanese criminal proceedings. Remarkably, the judge agrees. The second group of psychiatrists reaches a different conclusion. They diagnose Miyazaki with either schizophrenia or dissociative identity disorder, conditions that could potentially impair his ability to distinguish reality from delusion. If this diagnosis is correct, Miyazaki might genuinely believe that Ratman is real, that an alternate personality took control and committed the murders while his conscious mind was a passive observer. A third team is brought in to resolve the disagreement. After months of analysis, they deliver their verdict. Yes, Miyazaki has at least one personality disorder. Yes, his thinking is distorted and deviant. But no, he is not legally insane. He remains capable of understanding right from wrong. He remains capable of controlling his actions. He is criminally responsible for what he did. During the trial, more disturbing details emerge. A clinical psychologist who interviewed Miyazaki in 2006, 16 years after his arrest, reveals something chilling. Miyazaki told the psychologist that he believed his crimes would somehow bring his grandfather back to life. In his fractured mind, the murders were not acts of violence. They were rituals, sacrifices, a desperate attempt to undo the loss that had broken him. What he told me lastly was, "Please tell the world that I'm a gentle man," the psychologist recalls. A gentle man, a man who strangled 4 children, drank their blood, ate their flesh, mailed their bones to their parents. A gentle man. On April 14, 1997, 7 years after the trial began, the Tokyo District Court delivers its verdict. guilty on all counts. Sentence: death by hanging. The defense immediately appeals to the Tokyo High Court. The appeal is rejected on June 28, 2001. They appeal again to Japan's Supreme Court. On January 17, 2006, the Supreme Court upholds the death sentence. Tsutomu Miyazaki will die. But before the execution, one more tragedy unfolds. In 1994, while the trial is still ongoing, Miyazaki's father, Katsumi, the man who refused to hire lawyers for his son, the man who could not accept what his family had produced, walks to a river near their home and jumps. His body is found downstream. The official cause of death is drowning. Unofficially, everyone knows it was suicide. When Tsutomu is informed of his father's death, he writes a letter to a magazine publisher. His response is 2 words: "I feel refreshed." Some sources report he said he felt like new. No grief, no regret, no humanity, just relief that the man who abandoned him was finally gone. Tsutomu Miyazaki spends the next 14 years on death row. He receives psychiatric treatment for over a decade. He reads manga. He watches anime on a small television in his cell. He never apologizes to the families of his victims. He never expresses genuine remorse. He describes his murders as an act of benevolence. In his mind, killing those little girls was an act of mercy, a gift, a kindness, because in his fractured, monstrous mind, he truly believed he was a gentle man. August 1989. The media descends. When police raid Tsutomu Miyazaki's home and discover the wall of 5,763 video cassettes, Japanese television stations smell blood. News crews film every angle of his cramped annex. Cameras pan slowly across the towers of VHS tapes. Reporters rifle through his collection, pulling out the most shocking titles. The headlines write themselves: "The Otaku Murderer," "Anime Obsession Creates Killer," "Video Cave of Horrors." The term otaku, previously a niche word used to describe passionate hobbyists and anime fans, is suddenly weaponized. Overnight, it becomes synonymous with social dysfunction, sexual perversion, and violent criminality. Japanese media outlets run endless segments analyzing Miyazaki's collection. They display covers of horror films, violent manga, and pornographic anime. They interview self-proclaimed experts who claim that exposure to such material inevitably warps the mind. The narrative is simple and terrifying. Anime and manga created this monster. Commentators theorize that Miyazaki, neglected by his parents, retreated into a fantasy world where he lost the ability to distinguish fiction from reality. They argue that the extreme violence in films like the Guinea Pig series desensitized him to human suffering. They suggest that child pornography and pedophilic manga gave him permission to act on his darkest urges. Politicians demand action. Parents panic. The public turns on an entire subculture. Young people who collect manga are suddenly viewed with suspicion. Anime conventions are protested. Video rental stores begin removing certain titles from their shelves. The word otaku becomes an insult, a label that marks someone as dangerous, deviant, potentially violent. But not everyone accepts this narrative. Cultural critic Eiji Otsuka, who writes an entire book analyzing Miyazaki's crimes, argues that the media presentation of his video collection was deliberately manipulated. Otsuka suggests that photographers may have rearranged or even added certain pornographic tapes to Miyazaki's shelves to make his obsessions appear more extreme. The goal, Otsuka argues, was to create a visual narrative that confirmed the public's worst fears about otaku culture. Sociologist Sharon Kinsella goes further. She points out that in the late 1980s, large collections of manga and videotapes were completely normal for young people living in the Tokyo metropolitan area. Owning hundreds or even thousands of VHS cassettes was not unusual. Many teenagers and young adults had similar collections. Miyazaki's video collection was not the cause of his crimes, Kinsella argues. It was just part of the media landscape of his generation. In other words, millions of young Japanese people consumed the same media as Miyazaki. They watched the same anime. They read the same manga. They owned similar video collections. But only one of them became a serial killer. The problem was not the media. The problem was Miyazaki himself, his isolation, his deformity, his fractured psyche, his inability to form human connections. The videos were symptoms, not causes. But by then, the damage was done. For years afterward, Japanese otaku culture would carry the stain of Miyazaki's crimes. Young fans of anime and manga would face discrimination, suspicion, and social stigma. The word otaku would remain tainted, associated not with passion or creativity, but with perversion and violence. It would take decades for the culture to recover. June 17, 2008. Tuesday morning. Tsutomu Miyazaki has been on death row for 11 years since his final appeal was rejected in 2006. He is now 45 years old. He spends his days reading manga, watching television, and receiving psychiatric treatment. His lawyer, a woman who has dedicated years to his case, is still working. She believes there are grounds for a retrial. She is preparing new motions, gathering new psychiatric evidence, arguing that Miyazaki's mental state was never properly understood. She has no idea that time has run out. That morning, Japan's Minister of Justice, Kunio Hatoyama, signs 3 execution orders. One of them bears Miyazaki's name. Under Japanese law, condemned prisoners are not told in advance when they will be executed. Neither are their lawyers. The system is designed to prevent last-minute appeals, protests, or suicide attempts. Miyazaki learns he's about to die only hours before it happens. At the Tokyo detention house, guards come to his cell. They inform him that his execution will take place immediately. He is given a brief period to prepare himself spiritually if he wishes. According to reports, Miyazaki remains calm. He does not resist. He does not cry. He does not beg. He accepts his fate with the same emotional flatness that characterized his entire trial. He is led to the execution chamber. In Japan, executions are carried out by hanging. The condemned prisoner stands on a trapdoor. A noose is placed around their neck. A button is pressed. The floor drops away. The rope snaps taut. Death is usually instantaneous. At approximately 9 o'clock in the morning on June 17, 2008, Tsutomu Miyazaki is executed. His lawyer learns about the execution from the news. She is furious. She had been working on an appeal. She had requested more time. She had argued that Miyazaki's mental state warranted further examination. But the Japanese justice system does not wait. Minister of Justice Kunio Hatoyama defends the decision, stating that the execution was necessary to achieve justice. He adds that Miyazaki's crimes were so heinous, so beyond the bounds of human decency, that clemency was impossible. No one mourns Tsutomu Miyazaki's death, not his family, not the public, not even his lawyer, who fought for years to save his life only because she opposed capital punishment on principle. The monster is dead, but the question remains, was justice truly served? Miyazaki spent nearly 2 decades on death row. He received extensive psychiatric treatment. Multiple teams of experts examined him, debated his sanity, tried to understand the mind that could commit such atrocities, and in the end, no one could agree on what he was. Was he schizophrenic? Did he have dissociative identity disorder? Was Ratman real, or just a convenient fiction? Was he a product of abuse and neglect, or simply born evil? The answers died with him on that June morning. What we know for certain is this: 4 little girls are dead, 4 families were destroyed, and Tsutomu Miyazaki never expressed genuine remorse for any of it. In the end, perhaps that's all that matters. Marikono, age 4, murdered August 22, 1988. Masami Yoshizawa, age 7, murdered October 3, 1988. Erika Namba, age 4, murdered December 12, 1988. Ayako Nomoto, age 5, murdered June 6, 1989. 4 children who wanted only to play, to laugh, to go home to their parents. 4 children whose lives were stolen by a man who claimed he was gentle, who said he saw himself in them, who killed them because he was lonely. Tsutomu Miyazaki was born with a cruel deformity. He was neglected by his parents. He was mocked by his peers. He lost the one person who loved him. He retreated into fantasy because reality was unbearable. But millions of people experience trauma, disability, isolation, and loss. And they do not become monsters. Saitama Prefecture, which had one of the lowest rates of child crime in Japan, was forever changed. Parents stopped letting their children play outside alone. Communities erected barriers between themselves and strangers. Japan's otaku culture was stigmatized for decades. Young fans of anime and manga faced discrimination simply for enjoying the same media consumed by millions. And 4 families learned to live with a grief that can never heal. Years after the execution, a clinical psychologist recalled Miyazaki's final request: "Please tell the world that I'm a gentle man." But the world remembers him differently, not as a victim, not as a misunderstood outcast. The world remembers Tsutomu Miyazaki as what he truly was: a predator who killed 4 innocent children. Monsters are not born, they are made. But once made, they must be stopped. And on June 17, 2008, Tsutomu Miyazaki was stopped. 4 little girls never got that chance.